Today on the Star Trek Critic, The Neutral Zone, the last episode of the first Next Generation season. The good news, since these shows are in first run syndication, they are only 45 minutes long instead of 52, so I was able to get through the year really fast. Now I got 6 more years and 5 more series to go. Just a reminder, screenshots are used extensively to prevent copyright claims, and I got 2 in a row on the last episode. The first 2 points are lost since Wesley and Tasha are missing from the show. Tasha's leaving was the producer's fault, and Wesley could have at least 5 lines. -1 point for Picard leaving the ship for a conference call. They have secure lines for such an important meeting. -1 point for an Earth satellite getting this far out into space. -1 point for black squares on the console. We're wondering how it got there too. They calculate it will fall into a star. Worf says, hey, this is an ancient Earth artifact, let's save it and sell it to a museum. Riker says, no, preservation of space exploration is not our job description, so -1 point, since that is their job description. Worf is like, humans are really weird, and then sings his favorite Beatles song. Data says, we have time to learn about Earth history. Riker again says no, so -1 more point. Exploration is their job. Riker reluctantly agrees. Worf says, I number 1. -1 point for a single set of doors on the turbo lift. In case you didn't know, the number of this satellite is 4077. -1 point, they're supposed to scan for oxygen before they beam over. -1 point for it not being massively cold inside a giant refrigerator in space. -1 point for Worf not knowing how to get through the door. Not all doors in the future will be automatic. And -1 point for him trying to blast through. Ironically, disk drives are already old style. Just how big is this satellite? There needs to be hundreds of pods for this to be profitable. And when these satellites broke out of orbit, it's obvious no one was interested in bringing the bodies back to Earth. Aww. Data and Worf are both thinking, oh look, there's a hot girl in here. Maybe we should bring her back. -1 point. If Picard needed to go to such an important meeting so far away, he wouldn't have traveled by his slow shuttlecraft. Riker says, I number 2 right before he falls asleep. Riker gets pissy again. Why rescue 3 people on the probe? The 2 non-humans tell the human that maybe they should save the 3 human lives on board the containers. All through the show, they seem strangely uninterested in finding survivors from the past. -1 point for credit 6 minutes into the show. Geordi says, I number 3. Captain Picard holds an important meeting. He has the most important question. Will we be back next year? And why isn't Dr. Crusher here to discuss the 2nd season? Also, were these episodes the lost 4th season of the original series? Or the 5th season if you count the animated series as season 4? Or just rewrites of the cancelled Phase 2 where Riker and Troy looked way different? Or completely original episodes? We will never know. And what year is it anyways? Captain Picard sits down, performs the Picard maneuver, and asks, are there any questions? And Worf says, can we attack the Romulans, sir? Picard goes to see Dr. Crusher to find out how her contracts for the next season go through. Crusher says they're frozen and literally falling apart. And you know the most surprising thing of all? I said they were sexist and it terrified them. It was kind of a fad in the 20th century, but now the conditions are obviously terminal. And then I got fired. Picard says, you what? Well, I didn't know what else to do. But why are our lines foreshadowing the future? Dr. Crusher brought the 3 people back to life. Do you really believe that people won't fear dying in the future? -1 point for Picard getting after Data for bringing them back to the ship. Why is Data the only one that's ever concerned about other people? -1 point for Picard being upset that they will have to treat living human beings as living human beings. Listen closely to the floor creaking, so -1 point. -1 point for calling Lieutenant Worf to sickbay. -1 point for waking her up. They should just wake up naturally. And -1 point for injecting a stimulant into her neck. That's going to go straight to the brain and cause chaos. And of course, the whole reason to call Worf down was so she could pass out again. -1 point for Data not knowing what a homemaker is. Sadly, in the utopian future, it will be a crime to raise your own kids. -1 point for injecting her again. -1 point for assuming Sonny Clemens chose to be an alcoholic. They know that's not how it always works. Didn't they just visit a planet of drug addicts and then chose not to help them? -1 point for not letting these two wake up naturally, and -1 more point for jabbing them in the necks. Captain Picard says, Dr. Crusher, this is your problem, not mine. I'll see you next year. Riker says, I, number 4. Jean-Luc performs the Picard maneuver. Did you ever notice an extra always crosses when someone goes into the turbo lift? -1 point for Data and Crusher waiting for the first officer to come down and explain what was going on. Claire decides to explain it all instead. Mr. Offenhouse thinks she's the second baseman. Sunny thinks he's a Cylon. No, not a robot, a Cylon. Claire says she's been scammed by one person, so paid another idiot a lot of money. In retaliation of throwing away their life savings, her husband killed her and had her frozen. And this episode permanently locks in the entire Star Trek calendar of what year it is. Yes! Until now, they were pretty vague. Claire questions the meaning of life. Sunny explains the android and robot birds and bees. According to Dr. Crusher, this would place them dying in 1994, during the height of the eugenics wars. Maybe that's why Picard asked for security. Look what happened the last time they found a ship with frozen bodies from the 1990s. They talk about power failures on Earth, but in space a meteor shower could take out the solar sails and the capsule. Sunny says, what the hell? And you thought Riker was the only one? Data thinks this is all just a bunch of hooey. So in this timeline, the fad of cryonics died out, most likely due to medical advances, since diseases also fizzled out and people started to naturally live longer. After all, Dr. McCoy made it to 137. Ralph Offenhouse has to make a phone call. After all, he's got to check up on his daughter who has been living with a man who's pretending he's gay. Riker's like, wait, if I say I'm gay, I get to live with 2 girls at the same time? But then he says he wants to call the bank. Riker is thinking, oh, you're one of those old-fashioned capitalist pigs that use money. That means you're the doctor's problem, and I am leaving. -1 point for Starfleet knowing nothing about the Romulan Empire. They would still have some spies watching them, or at least a telescope to see that their star is going to explode in 30 years. Look closely, Sonny Clemens learns how to order drinks from the food replicator. And good news, the garbage bin we call television will be gone in just 17 years. Yes! And Sonny is right, the Star Trek crew is kind of boring, aren't they?
Number 1.
Riker uses the console to answer instead of his communicator, so -1 point.
Riker here.
And -1 point for not leaving them with a member of the crew. There are 1,000 crew members aboard, many of which are historians who can take care of them. Riker says a low-mileage pit woofie is the third baseman. He is way off. Both Data and Riker say that the people from the 20th century who watch their show are a bunch of losers. During this whole meeting, all they said is, we have no idea what's going on. Captain Picard is obviously done with their nonsense and wants real answers. -1 point for not muting Offenhouse, and this is why Riker used the comm panel so Offenhouse could call everybody and annoy the living shit out of them all. And it turns out the Queen Elizabeth II operated until 2008, which was the early 21st century. -1 point for not sending someone else to talk to them, since Picard is super busy about the Romulans. Offenhouse now thinks he's Mr. Burns, and now he spends 10 minutes boasting about what kind of a pompous ass he is. And now with this comment, Picard's like, oh, you're gonna get a good ass whooping from me now. Picard says, we own nothing and we're happy. Sadly, the World Economic Forum won. Aww. And -1 point for not having Deanna Troi go to them first. After all, it is her job. -1 point here. People who have been frozen for 300 years won't be wearing earrings. And the warp nacelles on the Enterprise are backwards, so -1 more point. And when did the 3 of them go to separate rooms? So -1 point. Donald missed Claire so much when she died. Instead of having her stuffed in a freezer in their garage, he had her stuffed in a freezer in space. If that isn't love, I don't know what is. Aww. -1 point for too much Troy cleavage. It was done as job security for the second season. The proof? Tasha and Beverly showed no cleavage, and look what happened to them. -1 point for Sonny going to sickbay to bother the doctor. He already knows how to order drinks. Ironically, this is the last scene for Gates McFadden before she got fired for calling the show sexist. My instinct is they wrote this scene for that very purpose. So -1 point for the producers being total asses to her. -1 point for her descendants being the cast of Star Trek. -1 point for this captain's log not having a star date. If they are going into a possible battle, this might be the last timestamp they have. And Geordi says hell this time. Usually it's Riker or Picard. And this is the first mention of the Borg, or at least the Borg system of attack, which means the conspiracy creatures got scooped up as well and will never be heard from again. Geordi says, I number 5, so it's time for a drink. -1 point for all 3 of them back in the same room. The Enterprise has a 3D printer on board, but don't tell Sonny, his new guitar is probably made out of everyone else's poop. -1 point for new black squares on the console in the back. Worf says, make it so. -1 point for the turbolift taking an unknown civilian to the main bridge during a time of yellow alert. Worf says, I number 6. -1 point for no one seeing him get on the bridge. Now he says hell. -1 point for them not tossing him off the bridge completely. Is the Romulan ship actually that much bigger than the Enterprise? And now we see Picard pose like Peter Pan. They're like, wait a second, is that a Cardassian acting like a Romulan? The Romulans also have the same problem with outposts being destroyed. Picard, as usual, blames the first baseman. Picard says, let's unite against a common enemy. The Romulans spout a lot of pompous assery, then they fly off before Picard can beam his pompous ass from the past over to their ship. -1 point for all 3 of them standing by the turbolift door, which strangely knows when they went to go through. -1 point for Claire back in her quarters with Deanna. Incredible, her great-great-grandson looks just like Peter Lorreson, the producer. She says she'll be a relic, just like when Scotty comes in 5 years. Often House quotes Scarlett O'Hara, where will I go? What will I do? Captain Picard says, frankly, I don't give a damn. Picard again says, you own nothing, so you're supposed to be happy. But who is he to talk? He's flying around in a giant spaceship, powerful enough to destroy planets. They could offer him a job at Starfleet Academy as an economics instructor, because he's an expert in the field. Sonny will easily get a job as a musician again, and Claire will go back to making homes. The conference room is behind the bridge, so -1 point for them coming out of the turbolift. Geordi comes up with a plan that'll cut months off their journey back to Earth, and Picard again's like, no, let's just keep them lost in time and space even longer, so -1 more point. Riker's full of it. He was the one who wanted them to stay frozen on the satellite that was going to fall into a star. Look closely, he almost does the Picard maneuver and then they cut away. One thing they still have to do is search these destroyed outposts, but they leave, so -1 point. Geordi says, I number 7, and they all fly off into the 2nd season. Well, almost all of them. Aww. So who were the people from the past? Anthony James has 75 screen credits, including Unforgiven, Buck Rogers, V, and the very scary chauffeur in Bird Offerings. And I admit, when I saw that as a kid, he scared the shit out of me. Marco Lima will be back in the 4th and 5th seasons, and then Gul Dukat on Deep Space Nine. He played 6 characters in Star Trek. He's also in Apple's Way, The $6 Million Man, The Bionic Woman, and The Incredible Hulk. Crazy Harrison has 25 screen credits. Leon Rippey has 65 screen credits, including Quantum League, Deadwood, and Stargate. Peter Mark Richmond made it to the age of 93 with 161 screen credits, including The Twilight Zone, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Apple's Way, and Knight Rider. He is also an accomplished artist. These prints on his website sell for $20,000 each, so not bad. The Neutral Zone, where sophisticated explorers seem to have no interest in finding people from the past, gets a score of 50%. Yeah! Wait, don't go yet. Time for the Season 1 recap. Giant jellyfish. Everyone gets drunk and stupid. Tasha fights for the vaccine. They meet the Ferengi. The Traveler gets them lost. Picard merges with a cloud. Lovemakers try to kill Wesley for falling into a plant. A Ferengi attempts revenge. Q pisses everyone off. The Plague Ship. The holodeck goes crazy. Data finds his twins. The Man-Haters. Bynars steal the Enterprise. And Admiral pays the price. Artists steal children. Saltwater attacks the Enterprise. Wesley meets a girl. Klingons. Yeah! Arms merchants destroyed by their own product. Drug cartels and drug addicts. Tasha dies. Aww. Time hiccups. Aliens almost take over Starfleet. And Romulans return. Now the three top shows I would say is 1100, Arsenal of Freedom, and Symbiosis, and the three worst would be The Naked Now, Hide and Q, and Haven. However, all of them have their pros and cons. The first season definitely had a clunky start and is much different than the other 6 seasons. After watching all of them, you wonder, how the heck did they make it to season 2? But they did. So be sure to leave comments below, click that like button, the share button, and that subscribe button, and I'll see you again for season 2.